Nice, interesting stuff there, huh?
Yeah. That's a high-low.
That's late Paleo Indian.
Late Paleo
Yeah.
Indian.
What would we do as far as exploring?
So I thought you guys would love to see this, and I'd love to learn more about it.
Techniques and like technology has evolved. And they're doing a lot of
Is that a real Eden?
remote sensing work and a lot of
Or is it
aerial
more agate
geophysical
based?
surveys where you can just measure
It almost looks.
based off of the magnetic field of the planet and the properties
When I first,
of the rocks. You
it,
can get
It's
a lot
very
of
much like the
information from
Sandwich
that.
Field stuff.
it almost looks like it's got a little bit of a fishtail.
Density.
Yeah.
You know,
That McConnell site down in
even
Ohio.
take samples or drill holes.
that's late Paleo Indian.
Eventually,
Also.
you're gonna test it and drill some holes, and cut some samples, do some geochemistry, things like that.
So you're at Wayne, huh?
Like, do you agree?
I did an independent study in high school first, so I have this.
I think
giant
that's a Holcomb point,
Okay.
which is also late Paleo.
Okay.
the Southeast.
So these three so far are late
Late
Paleo?
Paleo, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Very cool. Well, we're identifying artifacts. You're welcome to listen in and see what you know and what you don't.
This is an interesting head that you just picked up. I noticed that part of it is darkened, and I wondered if the Great Fires in Michigan in the 1800s, if that had something to do with that coloration. Just a long shot.
That's not right, isn't it? Well, no, it's not.
No,
It's not.
that's weird. I mean, it's got to be patination or something.
Yeah, something.
Very unique.
It's like it's been laying in something that's acidic, like in a pine forest. On the floor of a pine forest.
Okay.
And you've got one surface laying down.
Yep.
And getting discolored. It's a large triangular preform. They couldn't get it thinned down.
That explains the
And-
thickness.
Yeah. They couldn't get it. The flakes were terminating. They just couldn't get
Okay.
them to go far enough across. And I mean, it's a little hard to tell, but it could have been used as a knife-like tool,
Okay.
rather than as a projectile.
Okay.
Look at this.
Look at that.
It looks like it's on a channel flake.
Have a fluorescent mineral
Oh
in
my
that
goodness.
Dan would be real interested in seeing that.
under UV light.
That looks like a channel flake to me.
Yeah.
It's been turned into a small paleo.
Paleo, yeah.
So this would fit in the Paleo category?
Yep.
Yeah, so some of these, not these in particular, but some of the paleo points have very long flutes taken out of either side, right?
Yep.
This appears to be one of those fluted flakes. We call them channel flakes.
Okay.
And then somebody just sort of shaped it up and put a very nice Paleo Indian base on it.
Wow.
And who knows whether it was a kid or somebody messing around or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's what this looks like. So
Yeah.
yeah. Now that guy over there
Yeah.
with the beard would probably just be very excited to see this.
Well, maybe we can draw him over.
Hey, Dan.
And a lot of these small things too, like Peter picked up. I don't know what those are.
Oh my gosh.
How you doing, Dan?
Good. You got your Depends on? Yeah. Wow. So what I was thinking, I maybe you're wrong, but you could tell me. This appears to be a channel flake that they just sort of, shaped up a little bit and threw a base on.
Boy, it's hard to be sure, but yeah, it does kind of look like
Doesn't it look like it? Yeah.
that. But it's got some cortex over here left.
He does. It does.
So many of those high-low points are kind of crudely made, though. It might just be a crude version of a high-low point. You'd want to see what else was found with it, I guess. Are these all from the same site?
Yes, they are.
And since there are other high-lows from there, that might point toward it being associated with high-low.
Some kind of high-low.
Boy, I like that one, though.
Isn't that a beauty?
What do you think it is?
Well, it looks
I'm just thinking of the stuff from our yard.
looks like an agate basin with a squared base. So that same time period, I would think. But I never find them with a slight stem like that in my area. That's what amazes me about it.
Yeah, well, Bill was thinking maybe Eden-like.
Yeah, Eden Scott's Bluff like.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the stuff from the McConnell site in Ohio that Proofer did many years ago?
Is that the one that they call sawmill type points?
I think they might be.
Yeah.
It's very similar to the Saddles type stuff.
Yeah, I think I have read some reports on it. There doesn't seem to be any grinding on this.
No, there doesn't. You know.
So that makes me wonder if it's really that old.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it was a little bit more square and had some grinding on that base, it'd be kind of obvious Eden Scott's Bluff, and if it had a little more parallel flaking.
Yeah.
It's kind of in between several different possible point types.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, and you basically got the other end of pre-contact bracketed with these triangular points, which you've got some Lavana, which runs at the earlier end, about 8,700, 6,700 to 900, and then you get more into towards equilateral Madison style points.
But there's nothing in between, which
Yeah,
is really
which is-
interesting. I mean, we just had a collection in here that we looked at that had everything from about 3,000 years ago right up to when Europeans got here.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And everything was represented every
Right.
time period. Yours is very different because what you have is this very early stuff, and then the pottery, of course, would go with this.
Yeah.
All right, so, and then you have nothing.
Wow.
In
For
between. It's
9 or 10,000 years, and then all of a sudden you got a batch of stuff very, very late. So this is actually very different than what we normally see,
Okay.
and for that reason is kind of exciting. Now, the pottery too. I mean, the pottery. This is a Macomb style.
Yeah.
You know, so that's right in the same time period.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
perfect.
that fits.
That
in.
is so, and I never even picked that out. I got this. This was inherited, and I was it's very special. 120 acre site is where all this was found.
Yeah.
So it's isolated down to an acreage,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I never would have guessed that was pottery. So that pottery would have been from this time frame?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it fits.
yeah.
It fits these smaller. It fits these triangular points really well.
Perfectly.
And this
Okay.
little weekly notched job.
And in fact, we can even look at some of this stuff. This is fabric. This is a loosely woven fabric
Get out of
that's
here.
been
Yeah.
impressed into the wet clay.
No.
And
Yeah. When they're making the pot,
Yep.
they would take either cord and wrap it on a paddle, or sometimes they take old fabric, like a woven bag,
Yep.
and wrap it on the paddle, and then usually have a rock on the interior, and you're beating the exterior to get the slabs of clay
Yep.
to weld together.
Wow.
And then sometimes, and it changes through time. Sometimes they'll either partially or completely smooth away
Yep.
the impressions, and some types they leave the impressions. And it's actually, even these body shirts can be very informative because the cordage and the fabrics don't preserve.
Right.
But when we get them impressed on pottery, you can take casts of it and you can look at the cordage
Wow.
and what kind of woven materials they were using. So it's a way to get at stuff that doesn't preserve.
So awesome. I appreciate you guys letting me video this too. It's going to help me remember everything that was said. So these little guys here, I always had a question. What are these?
All right. Well, first let's do this.
Yeah.
This is a pipe stem.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a clay pipe stem made out of kaolin clay, and it's fairly late. It's in the sequence of pipes that Europeans either brought with them or made eventually here.
Okay.
That's a very, very tiny smoke hole. So the early ones have big smoke holes because the technique wasn't refined.
Yeah.
The much more, the refined ones, probably from the 19th century, have this very, very, very small pipe stem hole in them. So this is, this would post-date that, but it shows that either Europeans or Native Americans were coming back with that.
Wow. So that is, just for me, how far ago would that have been then?
It's been burned 19th century.
19th century.
1800s. Okay.
1800s, yeah.
Okay.
1800s.
I think the old farmers were sometimes smoking this.
Oh, they were still
too.
smoking.
Yeah. I find a lot of that stuff
Do you?
out on places where there aren't any artifacts.
Wow.
What's interesting is
them.
their minimal attempts at hygiene. If more than one person was using the pipe,
Yep.
they would take the part that somebody else had their lips on and they'd snap it off. And then they'd have a fresh piece of pipe stem, right?
Okay.
So these long pipes
Okay.
would start out really long, and they'd snap it off and snap it off and snap it off. So one of the most common things you find on European sites are little pieces of broken pipe stem like this, until they got it down to a nub, right?
Really?
And then it would go away.
Yeah, I've been cogitating on this the whole time we've been here.
Go ahead, Dan.
I think now, if I was going to classify that, I'd associate it with the late archaic greywacky type points. That's the most similar to the
really,
greywacky
you think?
points I find. Oh yeah,
So you would say that's so-called satchel?
it's most similar to those argillite greywacky points that I find on many sites. Weakly stemmed, about that size or larger, not ground on the base. But I had to think about that a while because I've never seen one on chert.
Well, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem right there. And that's the reason that they often called those greywacky things early archaic, late paleo. Was because of the shape.
Yeah.
It's in the car.
Yeah.
I brought it with me, but I have some photos.
And some of them really do look. They actually have the spur at the bottom and indented. So I'm wondering if they really are two different
That narrow
dates
too.
of them.
What it
Yeah.
might be.
That narrow?
I have some
Yeah.
other
Oh,
See,
yeah.
photos.
the narrowness is what is what made me lean towards late
It just
paleo.
doesn't look, it was in the middle, it was
Yeah,
an
some.
oddball.
I think it was harder to get the gray wacky
Perfectly
down
round.
that narrow
Yeah.
without breaking
Yeah.
it. But I do see some that are almost that narrow, but usually not quite that small, but sometimes.
I think it's. A
So what
glacial-
is this guy? Is that just?
A what?
A glacial.
I have no idea.
Okay.
Probably one of
It's really
these.
big,
It's a
yeah.
flake.
Just a flake?
Yeah, it's a flake.
Okay.
That's what all these are, and that's what you got there.
I
So
don't
those
think
are all
so.
flakes from
Those
making-
Those are all
come
flakes.
to
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
No,
you got to
but,
break a
I
lot of
mean,
rock in order to
It
make
looks
it.
Yeah.
natural to me. It's just
Yes.
been, heavily smooth
And then
eroded
this stuff
by
here,
water.
obviously, that's got something going on. Some kind of
He's
fossil.
a geologist.
Okay.
So when we see stuff like that,
He's the guy?
he's the guy.
Okay.
Those are
just lateral.
Yep, streams
usually
and
fossil corals.
moving water.
Okay.
can
Look like
really
that.
That's what I kind of
See,
thought,
this is
especially
a
with that.
crinoid stem, and it comes out of lime. Usually comes out of various kinds of seabed situations.
Okay.
right? But it's often also incorporated into flint, and it will leave holes in the flint actually
Right.
because it's so much softer. But this is the stem of a Devonian era
Like a
plant
shell, but-
from when this was a saltwater sea.
But
Yeah.
So,
Like
been
many
smoothed
millions of years ago. Right?
A lot of times they'll look exactly like beads. They're so symmetrical. People often call them Indian beads, but they
Yeah.
really are.
We call these
kind of-
worry stones.
Right near
Oh,
the
really?
Moron.
Yeah, you just keep polishing it.
Did you guys notice this hole in this point too? Is that something kind of strange? Or?
That's one of the fossil
The fossil is eroded out.
Okay.
that was softer than the, yeah.
Okay.
And it eroded right out of it.
Or sometimes they will pop out
Yeah.
as they're being chipped.
So Dan, when you were saying, did that change status then on that being paleo, or is that?
Well, it's similar to several different point types, so there's several different opinions. But
think it
my
is.
opinion, after
I
having
think
looked
it
at
is
it,
still
I would
a
call it
fossilized,
late archaic, even though
shell, but
I don't
I think
see
it's been
them made on
replaced.
that material. It's so similar in
The
style to.
minerals have been
It
replaced.
used to be called argillite, and now it's called gray wacky spear points.
Okay.
Yeah. They just call it
It's
meta
been
sediments.
so
When was
coated.
when was that?
Cemented.
It just doesn't have any of
Did-
its original.
yeah.
Cemented
If this
granular
is,
stuff.
if this
right?
is
Yeah, I haven't
terminal
seen it
late
like that.
archaic, it's in the 3,500 to 2,800 years ago range.
Okay, that's what I was trying to understand.
Yeah.
Would that apply to these two then?
No,
No, those are much earlier.
No, those are late paleo.
Wow. So I have a couple more things here. I don't know if they mean anything. I don't know quite what that is, but that was in this box that I got. A couple more rocks. I don't think that mean anything. And then this guy here, which I think I know what this is.
Oh,
A
Bayport.
fleshing tool.
Bayport shirt. It's probably a preform that they transported, partially worked at the source.
Okay.
That
Same
same
material as
limestone, same limestone that I was talking about.
Yep.
Has these great big spherical stones in them, right? That have these concentric rings, right? And that's the flint. And it's quarried, and it's been quarried in various, but this happens to run in a band from the thumb all the way across the Charity Islands up
Yep.
into Aranac County
Okay.
in a big band, right? And it outcrops in different places. It all has this, since it's spherical, right? It all has these concentric different colorations in it. It's a varying quality. And then you will often see that what they'll do is precisely what Dan was saying, and that is, they just whack off big chunks of that. And this is an actually beautiful piece of
That's a wonderful
Bayport,
one.
coming close to the limestone around the edge. And then they just sort of shape it up and say, okay, that's good enough for now. I don't have to carry the big rock home. I'm just going to carry this home because I know I can make something cool out of this.
Right.
So this isn't finished. But this is a work in progress, and it's ready to rock and roll.
Wow.
So to speak. Yep.
It's what we would call an early stage bifacial preform.
Okay. Bifacial.
Now, Bill was talking about those spherical nodules. Some of the early researchers have speculated that the Indians were gathering them along the beach up there where they had eroded out of the cliffs rather than actually quarrying it. So when those were first available, that would have been the source. And later, after those may have all been used up, then they may have had to quarry it. But to start with, they may have just been able to find those round nodules laying down on the beach.
Wow.
At least that's what Dustin speculated
Yeah,
in some of his
yeah.
writings. And that made sense to me.
Wow, this is incredible. So I do have a question before I move to some of this stuff with Peter. If I were to approach this property again and look for these types, because I inherited these, if I went to look for these, this now is basically a white pine forest, okay? Big, huge pine trees growing up through sand hills. These were actually found in the sand
Yep.
in the 40s when that gentleman was digging holes to plant pine trees.
Not surprising.
Yes.
Yes. So if you have sand ridges,
Yep.
those are going to be the better drained areas that people might, occupy. Because it'll not only percolate through, but it'll also drain off, right?
Yes.
So very often in the Saginaw drainage, you'll find that it's even low sand ridges are the ones that are occupied.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm not surprised to hear you say that.
And I think there are two other reasons that they would favor those sand ridges. There wouldn't have been very much undergrowth because the sand tends to dry out a lot in the summer. And it's also much easier to dig holes. They needed to dig pits for some of the ways that they cooked food, and it's not easy to dig a pit if
okay.
you don't have a shovel. So sandy soil is the kind of place where you can do it. So they had several reasons they would gravitate toward those sandy ridges, especially if it was associated with a lake or a stream or a pond.
So going back and looking today, what would I be looking for if I were to go out and look?
This is the kind of thing,
Yep.
and this is the kind of stuff. We hardly ever find all this stuff laying on the surface,
Yeah.
right? But it's usually the flint chips, or
Okay.
and this stuff goes away very quickly.
Does it?
So this probably came from below ground.
Probably.
This was probably excavated because, just like if you just broke a
Just
ceramic,
regular flower pot.
a flower pot,
Yep.
and you leave it out for 2 or 3 years, it's gone.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's low fired. They're probably firing the vessels in large open fires.
Yep.
No
So
glaze.
there's no kilns. No formal kilns per se.
Yeah.
The pots would be sun dried, and then they pile them up, build a fire, brush over top, set it off, and pray that your pot doesn't blow apart on you. Which that sometimes they do. I mean, when they're being fired, sometimes they just fail.
We actually know people who have replicated pottery like this,
Yep.
and they even knowing all of the modern techniques, they can get anywhere from a 20 to a 40% breakage rate when they're firing it.
No.
Yeah, so they might get as few as 6 out of 10 pots that are usable.
Wow. How big were these pots?
Some of them, there's some of the museum exhibits out here.
Okay. Massive.
Some of them are massive. They're huge for storage.
Would they?
Storage pots.
So what would they?
This is more, typical sort of
Yeah.
Wow.
utilitarian vessel size. This is
Can I get you to
one
look at the photo?
that goes with what's known as the Wayne tradition.
Okay.
Yep.
It's
back
basically
there is an
Saginaw
anvil
Valley,
stone.
southeastern
It's-
Michigan, running
they've been
between about
putting
AD
things on there
700
and
to
then striking them. So it
around
could be
11,
stone or
1100, a
nuts
little
or
after 1100.
any one of a number of other
It
things.
This
looks
is a
like there's
reproduction.
mark on
Okay.
one end.
This is a reproduction of one that came out of the Saginaw Valley.
It's like
So would they
30
keep
pounds.
fluid
Yeah,
in
that
that
was
water
suggested
and
that
or
they could-
grain? Maybe grains?
They could
there.
keep water
Where's
in
the mark?
it.
You could actually cook in them too if you do it carefully.
were cooked,
Or around
they
the
were
edge.
sturdy enough
Yeah.
that they
I mean, they
could
may have shaped
be
it,
put over direct fire.
Yep.
before they started using
Cooking
it.
pots,
So
that's
30 pounds. They're not going to
basically
be
the
carrying
size
this around. with them.
Right.
So this is the
Used
kind
for,
of thing they
you know,
might have shaped and
single
then left in
family.
one spot because they knew they were going to come back.
So
Which was very
incredible.
typical,
Now the other
is that,
thing
they
that can help
move
you
around
spot
the landscape,
areas where
but
they
they were
were
coming
actually
back to the
living
same spot
in the pine trees
on a
and the
regular
sand,
basis.
something called
This
firecrack
is there.
rock.
Just
And
use it.
if you go take a look at the MAS
very cool. You don't see
website,
that
I
very
have
No,
a
it's
picture
huge.
of some of
I've
that
seen
on there, and I
smaller
have
ones.
a
I have
description
a
of
few.
how to
I'm
identify
really
sites
into
in southern
artifacts.
Michigan.
But
Okay.
most
And that's
from Georgia.
often the
Because
first
I
thing and
took
the
the
easiest thing you'll see on an occupation site is these rocks that heated in the fire and they broke apart into angular pieces.
Okay.
Sites will usually have a lot of that
Yeah.
littered
In fact, they
around, and it's
actually
pretty easy
stayed
to
there for a
see.
while on a camp
Okay.
before they headed west.
Yeah, that's what I'm anticipating. All these pine needles on the floor, and it's
Yeah.
like, man, that's gonna be because these trees are massive now.
Well, the firecrack rock is probably going to be the thing you're going to spot most easily.
Okay.
that and flakes.
Yeah.
I've gotten some
Flakes.
pottery.
Wow.
I didn't
I'm
bring
excited
it
now to get back because I haven't looked.
If you would like to give me your contact information,
Yeah.
I can send you some more specific dates
Yeah.
on
Most
these
likely.
materials.
Oh, I'd love
I
that.
think it was shaped and left there and reused many